Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about font selection and some unique considerations that you need to keep in mind when you're selecting typefaces for use with your laser cutter. So there are three main typeface types that I'm going to be going over. The first is stencil fonts, the second is monoline fonts, and then finally script fonts. And at the end we'll talk a little bit about some of the flourishes or unique features of typefaces that we can get into. So the first thing we really want to look at is our stencil fonts. And you may be familiar with a very basic stencil font like this, but I have a couple of different selections here, and we're going to talk about why these are relevant, where you can find them, and then some unique ways to adjust them as needed. So in order to better understand why we need to use stencil fonts, we're going to go to Google real quick, and we're going to look at a couple images. So if you're cutting out letters from a solid space and you actually want to use that solid space, not just the letters you've cut out, you have to be paying attention to your counters. So you see the B, the R, and the A are missing the little center parts inside the letter forms. So that's what these are here. So this space inside the O, inside the A, and inside of this A is called a counter. If we don't consider those, then they fall through. And if this is the design you're looking for, that works great. But if you're looking for something a little cleaner where you can actually sort of read the letter forms a little bit better, you need to use what I am calling a stencil font. So you can see in these, the counters are open. So the R and the A have open space that flows into the background. And for that reason, it kind of has a much slicker, more professional look to it. I mean, you can argue one way or the other, but that sort of gives you an idea of the difference. So here, our counters have fallen out. We can't secure them. And then in this design, the typeface is designed in such a way that the counters are connected to the background. So here are a couple stencil fonts I have selected and a few things to consider. So some of these, you can see that the stencil design kind of carries into a couple different areas. So for Anaphora stencil, you can see it has a little bit more of like a traditional stencil look where we have that vertical line that cuts through our type, and we actually have some additional decorative line cuts that we wouldn't normally have. Now, when you're cutting with a stencil font, you have to be aware of the scale. If you cut this really small, these very, very tiny connections are not likely going to be enough to hold some of the letter parts in. For example, these little baby connections might not hold that very securely. If you're cutting it very large, it'll probably be okay. So we have Ari, I think is how this is pronounced. I'm not really sure. We have two different versions here. And then once again, we have decorative counters in addition to sort of these functional counter connections. And we see an open E here as well. So some stencil fonts will have some of the letters that are open with their counters and some that are closed. In cases like that, you can actually sort of just cut into the letter form if you need to. You can see with the B and the O, this is almost a perfect stencil font, but it doesn't quite work. So we have an open G, an open A, and an open E, but our O and our B are not going to work here. If we want to adjust that, I'm going to show you with another typeface one of the ways we can do that. So if I come here and I actually take my type in Illustrator and I go to Type, Create Outlines, I'm going to stop it from being editable, and it's now going to become a vector image. And if I then want to make this letter form an open letter form, there's a couple things I can do. I can take my eraser tool and I can sort of hand carve out an open space. So you can see with some typefaces that will work great, especially if you're trying to get like a really unique or nice cut through. Another way we can do it is actually just, I'm going to make it orange here, take a shape, didn't mean to make that part orange, alright, here we go, and we can draw a shape over top of our letter and get it lined up. And you could do any shape. You could draw a curve, you could use a circle, whatever fits the typeface. Select that and our shape that we're trying to cut, and go to our Pathfinder tool and hit minus front. Now in this case, because it was grouped, it didn't work correctly. So let's ungroup this really quickly. And then here we go. Let's just select those two, and you can see my minus front option worked perfectly there. If you don't see the Pathfinder panel, go to Window, Pathfinder, and it will pop up for you. So you can use the eraser, or you can do this. You can also use the scissor tool, and there's a couple different ways to do it, but I find those are the two simplest ways to create counters, open counters if you need to. So now we have Butler and then Butler Stencil, and you can see this one is definitely a lot more open. So we have slightly larger spaces here, and this will work great for a lot of different designs. We also have Kerox, or Kurox, or however this is pronounced, and you can see I've pointed out that the R has an issue here. So this is another perfect example where it's almost perfect, but we might need to adjust it. And in that case, once again, we will go to Type, Create Outlines, which is also Command-Shift-O. And in this case, because these are like sharp, angular designs, I'm going to take my pen tool. I'm going to grab a color so you can see it. And I'm going to draw a shape that I think looks design-wise like it matches this font. So I actually put a little cut in there, a little angle. I'm going to ungroup by right mouse clicking. I'm going to grab both shapes. I'm going to hit my Pathfinder tool, and I'm going to hit minus front. And now you can see, even though that's not quite perfect to the design, it matches a little bit better and it solves our problem. So that's a way we might fix a typeface if we're almost right, but not quite perfect. So then we have, these are such crazy names here, so QSAT, I'm supposing. One thing you might want to check whenever you get a typeface that you're sort of unsure about is you're going to want to type out a couple of different letters. So the main letters you want to check for, and I'm going to just scoot this over here, are capital A, capital B, lowercase b, lowercase e, lowercase g, and then let me see, uppercase O, lowercase o, p, lowercase p, q, lowercase q, and I think those are the main ones. Occasionally, you also need to look at the lowercase k. Sometimes the lowercase k's are connected at the top here, almost like a baby r. Speaking of which, uppercase r is another one you want to check. So you can see in this typeface, we're almost perfect. Almost all of the counters are open, except for the O. So for this one, I had a different solution, and it was relatively simple. What I did was I drew a circle that matched it about in size of what I was going for. I set it to an outline, and I made it a thickness that I felt matched the typeface. Then I went to my pen tool and I just click and hold to get to these options, add anchor point, and I added 2 little anchor points to that. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to select that new little segment I made and delete it. Finally, I'm going to go to my stroke panel, and I'm going to hit rounded end cap. And now, I don't know if you'll ever need to do that very specific set of adjustments, but that was a very relatively simple and kind of creative way to solve that, where I didn't have to just erase or cut in because I wanted to have those rounded end caps. So sort of unique to this particular typeface, but that's how I would solve this particular issue. We have Sear Stencil here, and it has like sort of a nice kind of curvy look. It's kind of interesting. And then Tingler and Tingler Script are another set that's actually really nice because they have pretty much all open counters. But there was one thing I noticed with this typeface that I did not like, and that is how this uppercase T smacks into the dot for the I. If you ever want to fix that, one thing you can do here is you can put your cursor in between the 2 letters, and if you go to your character panel, you can increase what right here is the tracking. So if you up that tracking, and I'm going to hold shift so it jumps by higher intervals, you can see there, it'll open it up. Oh, so our tracking's over here. Looks like I had the wrong one. Oh, so that's the kerning. Tracking is if you track the whole word. So if I select the whole word and then increase this, it will space the whole thing, and if you put your cursor in between, it's tracking. And that just sort of, I just didn't want those bumping into each other. I don't think it looked very elegant. It's something I would have left if I was going to be cutting out the entire word and I didn't want to lose that little dot. And then you can see Tingler Script here, nice and open, and the G, the E, the P, we're good to go there. So we have Ubuntu, I think is what it's called. And we have another one here, so you can see some nice open counters there. And then we have 2 really unusual ones. I just threw them in because if you're paying attention, you'll see that there's a lot of typefaces out there that have open counters, and you just kind of have to really pay attention. So this is definitely a really unique one, but there might be a very special project that you would use something like that for. And then same here with Piccolo block. So Piccolo block, definitely open counters. We don't really have any closed spaces, and it has a really unique look. So that's Stencil Fonts, and that's why, some ways we might be able to fix one that's almost perfect, as well as some considerations as you're designing. So one last consideration here is make sure to pay attention to the thickness. Something that's heavier like this is going to cut out a lot easier than something really, really narrow like this. You may need to adjust things or even erase or open some of these counters a little bit more if the connection is too delicate. So on to monoline fonts, and I'm not going to go too deep into this because I have a different blog post that goes into it, but monoline fonts are basically fonts or typefaces that are created with a single line. They're designed to look like a single stroke of the pen was used almost for every single character. They tend to be very even, and they're very, very simple. So none of these are actually true monoline fonts, in that if I were to expand these, so if I take this and I go to Object, Path, or actually Type, Create Outlines, and I zoom in, you can see even though it's very, very skinny, it's actually made it into a shape. So this is a rectangle, not a line, which means you can't score it with your laser. And the real benefit of monoline fonts is if you're trying to really, really quickly create a design, engraving this is going to take a really long time. And you may not want to outline it either, where you outline both the inside and the outside of the letter. So a monoline font will allow you to sort of just really quickly have that laser write out the text. Now, in my previous post, I actually show you how to achieve this, but I'm going to do it really quickly here as well. So I'm going to take Code Light, and I'm going to paste it here. And what I have to do is I have to pick a nice, thin, very simple typeface. And you can see that's what most of these are. And you can see some of these work and some of these don't, and I'll go over that. But I take this, I go to Object, Rasterize, and then I'm just going to leave the settings as they are. You can do a transparent background, doesn't really matter. I'm going to click OK. Nice and thin. Let's try it again with the white background just so you can see the difference. And I'm going to leave the white background. I'm going to click OK. Perfect. So there is our rasterized image. So now it's a flat graphic like a JPEG or an image you might find online. And now the next thing I need to do is I need to go to Image Trace. And you can see whenever you click a raster graphic, Image Trace will automatically pop up. I'm going to hit the drop down and I'm going to say Line Art. And then as that happens, it's going to load for a second and it's going to turn into line art. And now if I want to adjust it a little bit, all I have to do is click this button, which brings up the Image Trace panel. If I toggle this open, you can see that I can open my advanced panel here, and I can make some additional adjustments. So sometimes you might want to play around with the paths or the corners. You might need to adjust this. In general, that sort of first pass is about as good as it's going to get. And then when I'm done, if I hit expand, you will see when it actually finishes loading that now instead of a shape, it actually is lines. You can see that the lines follow the center spines of each letter. And what that does is it'll just make it really simple for the Glowforge or any other laser to very quickly score this text instead of very slowly engraving it. Now in some cases, you'll see that you're going to get some errors. So you can see with this one, the type was just too skinny. So we have some odd breaks here. And then with this one at the top, I kind of threw this in because although if you search monoline font, this will come up and it's technically kind of a monoline font, when you actually rasterize it and try and trace it, it doesn't work out very well. So if you only have a couple minor like off areas, so Bryant's not the best, but you can also go to your eraser tool, click and hold, or actually it's the paintbrush, and grab the smooth tool and just run it along the spine of the letter and smooth it out. So if you have only one or two letters or one or two areas you're trying to fix, sometimes that will solve your problem there. So that's enough for monoline type, since we have a different blog post about that one. Next, I'm going to come down here and we're going to talk about script typefaces. So these are a favorite for many designers, but there's a lot of things you want to consider. One of the first things you want to consider is the weight of the letter. So with Magnolia Sky, you can see it's very curly and really beautiful, but these areas between the thicks and thins have a lot of contrast. So we have some really, really skinny areas and some much heavier areas. And when you see these tiny little loop connectors, you can see there's very delicate areas that are holding these letter forms together. So in order to fix that, what I will generally do, let me copy it over here, is I will set this to outlines when I'm finished. So type, create outlines. And then I will very simply, so remember you gotta fuse your letters, but let's do that real quick. We'll go to our Pathfinder, fuse those, exit our image trace panel, and now I'm gonna add a stroke. So if I just start adding a stroke, you can see it gets a little bit heavier. Now, I'm kind of a purist, so I don't generally recommend changing fonts by like stretching them, adding strokes, or adjusting them, but for the purpose of the laser cutter, it might be necessary sometimes. So maybe that's a little too much. I'll drop it down one. And if we're happy with that and feel those connections are going to be enough at the scale that we're cutting, then we're good to go. The next step would be to go to Object, Path, Outline Stroke, and then to fuse it one more time using the Unite option from the Pathfinder. That will make it all one nice shape, and it'll be ready for cutting. So that's what you see here. You can see the red stroke and how that thickens it up significantly from the original typeface. Now, the next thing to consider is that some script typefaces will connect their capital letters to their lowercase letters, and some will not. So with Lavendaria, you can see that all the lowercase letters are very nicely connected as if a calligraphic pen was writing them, but the uppercase letters are independent. Now, to solve this, all you have to do is, once again, put our cursor in between. We can go to our character panel here, or we can hit Option and use our arrow keys just to touch them so they connect. Now, it's not the best design to have that letter running into it like that, but it is a solution if you need to have a capital letter and you need to cut it all as one shape. So in some cases, like in Sturdy, that doesn't look very good. So our other option, and let's set this to outlines. So type, create outlines. You got to be a little creative. So I'm going to zoom way in. I'm going to use my direct selection tool, which is my white arrows. I'm going to grab these 2 points, so I just clicked both of them, and I'm going to use my arrow key, and I'm going to scoot it over. So to me, that looks better than smushing the S up against the T. It's still not quite perfect, but that's another kind of creative way you can connect the dots here, so to speak. So same thing here, we have Tingler Script again. Open counters, nice and heavy, is a really good one for cutting. Battle Shine Regular is another nice one. Disconnected capitals, but definitely fixable. In this case, what I would do is I would actually use my pen tool and try and draw this shape of the H back to the B. When you're connecting your letters, you really want to think about how the pen would write them, because all typography comes from, it's meant to emulate the way the hand writes. So if you follow the shape of how this is written, it has a rhythm to it. And when you finish the H, you come up here to the top to begin writing your A, and you follow it around. And if you keep that in mind when you're connecting them, you can make much more elegant connections than some of the ones I've seen. Occasionally I see people just like make a bar across or something. Don't do that, it's ugly. You can do something a little more elegant than that. Thinking of Betty, another thick one, but disconnected capitals. Daydreamer has connected capitals, but it's a little bit thinner. It also has some very small, delicate little counters, so keep that in mind. Autumn in November is another nice one, nice and heavy, has a really nice sort of rhythm to it, and unique capital letters. Lazy Ride Script, these three really definitely emulate the Monoline font look, which is really nice. And then these two, Roughton and Lazy Ride Script, have connected capitals. Monte Carlo does not. Now, Samantha Italic is kind of a unique one, so I'm going to show you this. This is a pretty popular typeface. Let's go visit its page and learn a little bit about it. So Beautiful Samantha Script or Samantha Upright. This is a really, really fun typeface. So you can see this one has so many detailed, interesting flourishes, and we're going to look at flourishes in a moment, but I think it's worth looking at. So the whole font family is usually about $100 for this one. There is, right now, I don't know how long this will be true, so if you're seeing this video 2 years from now, I'm sorry if it's not the case, but it is on sale here on Mighty Deals, which is pretty cool. So you can see if I scroll down, there's all kinds of really nice additional catchwords. We have some really, really elegant looking flourishes. We also have some standalone flourishes and ornaments, frames, and then there's a craft version of this font that you can see is a little bit thicker. So remember when I was talking about those thicks and thins? They've adjusted for that so that it's easier to cut out on like a Cricut or a laser cutter. So you can see that in all kinds of different designs. So just a really cool typeface, honestly. But it's one I just purchased, so I'm definitely going to be trying it out. But you can see that's sort of the basic version. And then if we scoot over to our final discussion here, things with flourishes, you can see that same text, and I'll drag this over, but with some flourishes added. So how do we add flourishes? It's actually very, very easy. All we do is we type out our words as we normally would. We select the letter that we want to see if there's a flourish for, and we go to our glyphs panel. And our glyphs panel can be found if you go to Window, scroll down to Type, and then hit Glyphs. And your glyphs panel in Illustrator will show you every character in the set. And you can see why you have to pay for this typeface. It has so many options in here, and if I scroll all the way down, you can see these are my decorative elements as well. So if I take my text here, I'm going to make it a little bigger so we can see it, and I select this A, it's going to take me to the A in the character set, and then if I click through, you can see, if I just double click, it's going to give me different characters here. So you can see these are ligatures, and what a ligature is a decorative, stylistic way of connecting different characters. So these are unique to this particular pairing of letters. So you see that a lot of times with like F's, because F's together tend to look really silly when they're connected. So that's kind of one way to do that. So we can see, okay, well maybe I don't want this M. I can come back here, double click, and change it. So if you just scroll on through, there are so many really, really cool decorative letters here that you can play with, and this is a great way to look through it. So you can go to entire font, you can go to different stylistic sets, standard ligatures, and you can find all of this. So you can see this is a really well put together typeface. It's got all the open type features in it. You can hop down here, you got everything from superscript numbers, you've got swashes, some tilting ones here, and then a variety of different stylistic sets. So if you were trying to match, you can see that they're paired up here. Or we can go back to the entire font. So that is how you would add all of these fun swashes and slashes and little decorative elements. And that includes some of the fancy ones down at the bottom. So if I were to hit enter and scroll all the way down, you can see there's even like some really pretty little decorative elements that you can add in. So let's come back here. I'm going to put my glyph panel over here, because we're going to be coming back to it, I'm sure. I'll get it to pop into the menu there. Come on. Well, it doesn't want to go, of course. Let's try dropping it there. Come on. Alright, maybe if we close it up. Here we go. Come on. Alright, well, it can just hang out right there then. It's giving me trouble today. So we have a couple. This is actually one of my favorites. I don't know why I really like this one. It's called Foreplay, and you can see it up here. And what's kind of neat about this one is if you just hold Shift, like you're using a capital letter, it will give you the swashed version of the character. So it's basically your capital letters are your swashes, and your lowercase are just your regular letters, which is kind of fun. So it's really easy to work with, and that's a free typeface. So we see Magnolia Sky again, but you may notice that there are some fancy characters in here as well. So you can see this really nice decorative Y. We have Elmore, Hello Hannah, I Love Glitter, and Shorelines. Now, I Love Glitter and Shorelines are free typefaces. Hello Hannah is a purchased one, but I did buy that because I loved how much thicker the letter forms were than these two designs. So these are not going to cut as well. You can see there's a lot of little open holes here. It's really thin. These are kind of like monoline typefaces, but Hello Hannah has the weight, I think, that's needed in order to cut this out. So let's take a look really quickly. I'm going to pull this way down into my workspace. I'm going to scroll over here. And I'm going to delete my fancy characters and show you what this originally looks like. So if I type in Hello Hannah, this is originally what I'm going to get. In order to find this heart and these two swashed end characters, you guessed it, we're going to click in here and we're going to open our glyphs panel again and we're going to scroll down. So you can see this was a little different in that it's almost created ligatures. So in order to get this connection of this heart, we actually have to go to our O and get rid of that and replace it with the fancy heart O, and then just hit backspace there. Same here, so if we want to change our H, you can see these are the H's where the swash starts at the beginning, and then if you keep going along, there's the H where the swash starts at the end. So highlight my letter, double click the one I want to replace it with, and then same here, so let's find our A, bam, right there. And that's how we get to these really little fancy swashy doodads. So let's take a look here. And then let me show you Hello Hannah as well. So it's on sale here on Font Bundles. I'm not sure if it'll always be on sale, but you get the idea. So you can see there's some nice examples of how you might use it. You can see in general it's used with all of the lowercase letters. And if you look here, do you see that K? That's the K I was talking about earlier, where sometimes the K, instead of having just a bar that sticks out the top, it actually has a counter form. And you can see this is actually an open counter. So that's something that we mentioned before. So you can see the full character sets there. And then licensing and everything like that is right there on the page. Now, I mentioned Monoline Fonts before. This is one of the only true monoline fonts you can find, and it's called Dear Agatha. You do have to purchase it, but it has a ton of different options, and you can see in this one, it is a true monoline typeface. So I don't own this one yet, but I'm not sure if you have to type it and then expand it, or exactly how, if you have to copy and paste the letter forms, I'm not really sure. But you can see that it is a true monoline, which means that the laser is going to walk along this and score each letter form, making it so much faster than trying to engrave. So we've looked at these ones. Freebooter is another one. This is not one of my favorite typefaces. I think it has some kind of ugly elements to it where you see this like strange connection here between the R and the E, but there are a couple designs where this will work great. And then finally, I have three kind of unusual ones here. I just have Harrington, Luca Regular, and Debonair Inline, and those are not Flourish fonts. I just threw them in because I think they're kind of interesting. They're worth looking at because they show us some other unique things about type. So in this one we can see just a really nice sort of like double line design. I just think that's really beautiful, and there's a lot of great designs this would look great with. And then another one here, definitely probably you want to engrave these, that's where they're really going to stand out, but kind of cool. Harrington just has some like unique little serifs here, and then some open counters, and it just shows you that there's so many different ways to draw a letter form. So you can see this is like an A where it ends at the bottom, and then this is a totally differently designed A, and it's a really unique G here, so kind of fun. But hopefully that kind of gives you a sense of some of the different typefaces and how you might use them and why they matter. So now that we've looked at this, I'm actually going to have a part 2, if you scroll down in the blog post where this is connected, or if you look in the description, that's going to walk you through how I would use these fonts and these different type designs to create a variety of different table place settings. So scroll on down and check out that next video. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have any questions, just let me know.